Hey everyone, welcome back to another special episode of the Legend Fiction Show. We're joined by Katelin Cummins. Hi Katelin, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Katelin is one of our fantastic mentors in the Legend Fiction community, so this is going to be fun because I just learned that she has a background in fencing and she met her husband on the fencing team. And I'm like, what? I knew you were a gamer and you provide, editing services to our community. So here's something new: swords and sword fights in fiction. So this is a
Yeah,
recording for our upcoming convention, LegendHaven Worlds Without End, happening in October of 2023. So first, let's talk briefly about, okay, you're a writer, you're a mentor. It's important we get that out of the way.
hmm,
What is it? How do you work with legend fiction? And then let's talk about swords.
sure. Well, I'm a fiction book coach certified through Author Accelerator, and I'm a volunteer mentor at Legend Fiction. So I try to be available in the forum in the community. I host some free events to talk to the writers,
Mm-hmm.
and I am available to edit um, people's submissions if they want.
Mm-hmm.
So that yeah, and I am available with the Legend Haven event and just try to help be present in the community and support the writers there and make
Mm-hmm.
friends.
Yeah, for a long time, you've hosted. You used to host write-in sessions. Now you're focusing on other
Yes.
things, but you did a phenomenal job in the workshops and then hosting them, hosting the writing sessions. And there are some people now who are finished or are working on projects that they never could have done if you hadn't showed up and just, well, generously given of your time, and then of course offered your services. So you mentioned that you have this fascination for swords and you have a background in it.
Yes.
So let's go there. Swords and sword fights
Yeah.
in fiction.
So my background with swords is, first of all, as a kid, just I liked the sword fights, and I would imagine like an alternate version of myself that had broadsword, and I just really like sword fights and stuff. So in high
Mhm.
school, there was a fencing team, and I joined the fencing team, and I was a foilist. Met my husband there. You mentioned that. Um, so sport fencing is my background. I did it in high school. I did it in college. I tried, like, pretty much stopped after college. I tried to get back into it again after a while as an adult. Realized very quickly that I wasn't in fit shape as an athlete, and that would take a lot of time and energy and money. And keeping up with the fencing equipment is really expensive. I would want like classes and coaching. And I just realized very quickly that it wasn't what I wanted to spend all of my time and energy on, but I do kind of miss
Mhm.
it. I'm
Yeah.
just not a serious fencer. So I'm
What did
not
you
an
used to
expert.
Well, what did you love most about fencing? I mean, there's other. I mean, broadsword fighting is sort of. It's not competitive, I
Yeah,
don't think, but it's really growing now, and there's other kinds of
there's
swords.
there's historical fencing associations and clubs out there, and I actually looked into one that's local to me that does Spanish rapier and German broadsword.
Wow.
Super cool, but that was also as an adult once I had gotten away from sports, and I was afraid of injuring myself because I wasn't that active. Um, and so I didn't keep up with it. So there's sport fencing with like Olympic style foil, saber, and epee. There's historical fencing, places that go more into what it like the fighting styles from history, because sport fencing is now just an Olympic sport, and
Hmm.
it's more it has developed into what it is past
Hmm.
like what the history was.
Right.
There are also a lot of clubs and associations that do sword fighting stuff, like the Society for Creative Anachronism,
Hmm.
and there's also like boffer clubs with like foam swords and stuff. I've never
Okay.
done any of that, but I just know
Okay.
it exists. So there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm not an expert in any of it. Like I said, I was a foil fencer. I was average in high school and not really able to good enough to be competitive as an adult.
Hmm.
Like so I wasn't like even very good at it.
Yeah.
But I liked it because it was fun. Um, it was kind of imaginative. I would have dreams where my I would be using my fencing skills in my dreams against like enemies in a fantasy setting,
Cool.
like while I was sleeping. But Yeah, so while actually sport fencing, it's like a complicated game of tag. We're using metal sticks. So as someone who likes games and stuff, like sports are games that you're just playing physically. So in that way, it's really fun, and I really like the challenge of learning the footwork and the blade work because there's very specific moves that you learn. And then the bouts where you fence one on one with somebody, those are very exhilarating because you're taking everything you learned and you're doing it in real time, defending and attacking and getting points and trying to, be competitive and win the tournament. And what's really a thrill is when you take all of your learning and it starts to become instinctual. So then you end up not thinking like through everything, but you're kind of instinctually reacting and
Hmm.
fencing quicker than you could think. And it's
Hmm.
super cool. And I just kind of wish I was that person who still kept with it, but
Yeah.
you can't do everything in life. And I chose to spend my time in other ways, and that's fine. So,
So it's interesting, just and we'll come back to this. It's like what people get wrong with these writing sword fights, because how you're describing this already is making me think that what seems to be the age-old, gripe between the soldiers on the front lines, saying what you learn in the classroom is nothing compared to how it is in the field and stuff.
mm,
So, um, just from out of your experience, then uh, what are things that, how do I say this? The sport has evolved differently and it prioritizes things differently compared to an actual combat school where
right.
in the past where you might use swords. Um,
Exactly. So, like, swords and swordmanship was really designed to kill people. And that's not like I feel like I'm not like getting trained in sport fencing is not getting trained as a warrior for like
mhm,
fighting real life or death things. You know
right.
what I mean? So, um,
But you
in
did learn
sport
really
fencing, all
valuable
the danger
lessons.
is taken away. So, like, you're just, you're parrying and, you know, attacking and everything. And, the worst that'll happen is you might get a bruise.
Yeah.
Or, if you trip
Oh,
because your
I
footwork is
completely forgot. I
bad or
once was an
whatever.
absolute dummy, and I was fencing with a friend over a weekend, and he ended up almost taking out my eye, and I wore an eye patch for like
Oh,
two
yeah.
months or something. It was because I didn't want to wear the mask. I was like, yeah, that's not cool. It's like,
Oh, no.
just
Yeah.
wear
You
the
need to
mask.
wear a mask. Yeah. So in
Yeah.
sport fencing clubs and everything that I did, like there
Hmm.
were very strict safety rules. You had to be
Yeah.
wearing all of your padded,
Hmm.
layered equipment and protection, and you always had to be wearing the mask
Yeah.
when the blades were out.
Hmm.
Um, so, because that, that's a thing. So, and then of course the more skilled you are, the less likely you are to get injured because
Right.
if you're keeping good distance in the bout, you're not going to slam
Hmm.
into the other person's blade and get a big
Yeah.
bruise.
So
Um,
when you're watching sword fights happening in movies now and so on, do you like instinctually make mental notes like, oh yeah, that wouldn't happen, like, oh okay, they got that right, or something like that?
when I see something, so there are lots of different styles of sword fighting that I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
When it's more like rapier style, like fencing style, and I see something that looks familiar, I get super excited. I also get excited when there's a training scene and they're talking about positions, sword positions, and they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they're like going through the positions and practicing. I'm like, ooh, yeah, it's cool because there were numbered
Hmm.
things in the fencing that I learned. Um, so yeah, that's really cool. But in terms of like depicting sword fencing, sword fighting in fiction, if you're doing it in a fantasy setting where these are real swords and you're doing it, there's a level of danger there,
Right.
that would be expressed,
Right.
and um, it really, it's always fascinated me, kind of like, well, I think swords are really cool and the sword fights are really cool, but I don't want to see the bloody fights that look realistic at all.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm being a fan of swords in a fantasy setting
Hmm.
is not the same thing as liking what swords are really meant to do. And
Right.
sometimes I've wondered, like, is that even okay? This is
So where
really
do you go with
weird.
that? So like, problem with swords and why we like them anyway.
Yeah.
How are you wrestling with that?
So pretty much I think about it, I like to think about it more symbolically, and I like to think about it like uh, the trying to protect people and trying not to kill people kind of way, even though swords are the only weapon that's only purpose was to kill people. Like a lot of other weapons that are used in warfare or hurting other people have also other uses, but swords are just a weapon to kill people.
Yeah.
But I think that that society has sort of romanticized them throughout history too, in recent history, and I think that's partially because they were historically. I'm not an expert in history at all, but from what I understand, the people who used swords historically were the more wealthier classes or the more elite warriors. Like I think samurai were a very special type of warrior, and they were kind of revered in more European circles. Like it wouldn't be the poor person's weapon. And then I think it just evolved into just like this more elite and more refined, and people started, for the nobility had these swords, and they started using, because sport fencing I think originated with, you can go back to more like fighting between nobles that they weren't really trying to kill each other, and they were just like
trying to score a mark,
see who's better. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So I think there came to be a bit of a nobility that we've kept an idea of. And then the other thing I like is the symbol of warfare and fighting evil. And as Catholics, we know that there's spiritual evil out there. And so swords become a symbol for fighting that evil as well. So those are the two things I like. I like the test of skill when you see a duel in fiction. And I like the comparison to just fighting evil in general.
Yeah.
So I still like swords, even though they're a bloody weapon.
I don't think they're ever going to go out of style. I mean, yeah, sure. It's like, it's been, what, 1,000 years really? Or I don't know, maybe 700 years since we really needed to use them. And they're still as popular as heck. But I think they've become a tool that's perhaps outgrown their original need to now become something that means a whole lot more. Like you said, the pursuit of excellence, to even follow like a discipline today or a skill that has no practical value, but it has a ton of meaning and value for you as a human being, to like to learn karate, right? You don't just learn it just to be able to walk down dark alleys. It's like, in a world where guns, for example, are now the norm, it would seem martial arts are just, we should just dismiss them. But no, they're even more popular because it is now a tool or a practice that serves another function of cultivating personal discipline and excellence. And I think a sword is an indication of that. And you're right that it's also became a symbol of higher classes and so on, but it also is it's like a symbol that also is valuable for I keep missing my point of the ability, of the capacity for action, right? The capacity to be violent, which is extremely important. And I would say primarily for, I would say generally for men, maybe a lot of women too want this, but men need in a special way, a capacity for violence against other men. And so that's why we learn different disciplines of mastering that capacity for violence. And the sword is a symbol of that. I remember in the Arthurian saga, right? Merlin leads Arthur to discover Excalibur. And I always loved the fact that he's like, which do you think is more important, the scabbard or the sword? Oh, the sword, obviously. Look at this thing. It's like, well, hold on. As long as the sword and the scabbard are together, no blood is spilled. Your blood is not spilled. And that made me, I've been chewing on that for now 10 years. Like, wow. Every time someone pulls out a sword, there's a reason it's got two edges. It cuts you and it cuts somebody else. It's a weapon that, everybody gets hurt when a sword gets drawn, even if it's needed. You get cut by trauma or the situation. So if
Yeah.
you are able to master a discipline to a point where you don't need to use it, I think
Hmm.
that is, that pursuit of excellence is one that's what swords stand for, and I think they will
Yeah.
forever.
I agree with that, and that also reminds me of like you had started to ask like what do people get wrong in fiction sometimes, or
Yeah,
what
so
could
let's go
people get
there.
wrong?
I mean, I love
Like,
lightsabers, but hey, I have a hard time watching lightsaber fights.
oh, you
Maybe I
do.
just love them. I don't know what to do with them. So
They're great, but like swords are dangerous. So in our fiction, when we're actually writing, we want to make sure that our characters are getting the feeling that swords are dangerous and that they're
yeah.
being handled with care. Because if you think about yourself and you're handling a very sharp kitchen knife,
Hmm.
you know that that could cut you, and so
Right.
your awareness is around safety,
Hmm.
and the sword is a very sharp sword, very big, um, that much more dangerous. So
Hmm.
that is one thing to remember with the characters, is that sense of danger. And I'm not necessarily saying that, oh, I see people get these things wrong all the time and whatever, but just things that I was thinking to keep in mind.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Um, and then another thing I'd say is, we really like sword fights and good choreography in visual medium and movies and shows and everything.
Hmm.
And that's can be really hard to recreate in the written fiction,
Yeah.
because a lot of the appeal in the visual medium is it looks cool. But if
Right.
you describe that on the page, it can get very boring, blow by blow,
Yeah.
technical,
I saw
everything.
that recently. It was a YouTube video about writing, and some important author or something said something like, visual medium is excellent for action. It thrives in being able to communicate action. But the written word has a very hard time with that because it doesn't work the same way.
Right.
Um, Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But the thing to get on the page for writing when
Hmm.
you're doing an action scene, and this goes beyond swords, is what does it mean to the character? Keep in mind the stakes.
Hmm.
Those stakes and the meaning of the battle should be forefront in that point of view character's mind before, during, after the battle. Keep on the page what why does this matter to them? Um, have them react in thought and emotion to everything that's going on. Have
Hmm.
good dialogue.
Hmm.
Um, so that's really the thing to focus on for a fight scene
Yeah.
in written fiction. And it really is the same thing that makes a battle on screen for visual very appealing as well. Because if it doesn't have the character meaning and connection for the viewer,
Yeah. If there's no
a lot of
stakes.
people are still going to find that boring. Some people are still going to love it because it looks amazing, but then there are people who will fall asleep because
Uh-huh.
they're just not
Even if
feeling the
it's
meaning.
exploding every second.
Yeah, exactly.
Why should I
So it's
care? Yeah.
yeah, it's the same principle.
Yeah.
It's just even more important on the written page.
I
So
find also, I
that's
remember
one thing.
I was reading a novel years back. It was a Redwall novel. And there was at the time, I was also doing lots of writing. And my sword fights and the stories, they would be blow by blow. He ducked and then he leapt. Backwards flip. Please, nobody ever do backwards flips, Um, but then I was reading a Redwall novel, and I remember there was like 2 or 3 sentences to describe an entire battle scene between the hero and the bad guy during the
Yeah.
climax, and then they would cut back to the massive everything else is going on. I thought, I want to know what happens in the actual battle. And then I get old and realize, yeah, I actually don't, because the blow by blow is not as meaningful, and that's why in
Yeah.
stories, what do we end up doing in stories? There's more conversation.
Hmm.
I want to come back to the impact of gaming on sword fights. We'll do that in a second.
Mm.
So what do we do then in when we're writing a scene? So you've identified stakes is
Yeah.
important. Um, what are some other things to make a sword fight feel real and gripping and immediate?
So with just about everything, you make sure that you communicate the point of view character's thoughts and emotions on the page. And so you're not just saying it was scary or something. You're really getting into detail about how it feels,
Yeah.
the physical, internal sensations, and also the thoughts of like what are the characters' reactions to everything?
Hmm.
Why are they choosing what they're doing? And yeah, it can be very effective to shorten it all. Like it doesn't have to last very long, and it can be um,
Hmm.
very effective to just keep the fight short. And in real life, like in a historical battle or in a fencing bout,
Yeah.
it's short.
And that's something I was going to say was I remember once reading like about samurai and their sword fights. It was like a point of pride that a sword fight was less than like 5 seconds or something. If it's more than 6 seconds, there's something wrong. You're not actually committing to, like
Yeah,
playing chess. The goal is to kill the king. Otherwise, you're just messing
right,
around with everything else. And
right.
that's where I think
So
gaming
like,
in the last 30 years or so, gaming where you just beat down and pound down on the other side and the health bar slowly goes down. It's like, well,
mhm.
yeah, actual sword fights aren't like that.
Yeah. So as for visual medium, we can find it really exciting, and I certainly enjoy a long, choreographed, beautiful, very exciting fight scene. I still
On
enjoy
top
that.
of two semis for like 10
Yeah,
straight
like
minutes.
I still enjoy that, even though I know it's ridiculous and wouldn't really happen that way. I
Yeah.
still enjoy that. But you know, it's probably better in our fiction to be short and to the point, and the characters should really be like trying to get the goal. Like, so if the
Hmm.
goal is if it's like a kind of a not to the death match and they're trying to humiliate the other person, like they're trying to get to that goal very quickly.
Hmm.
And if the character is trying to kill the other person, they're trying to get to that goal very quickly. So it's not
Right.
just let's bounce our blades against each other for a while. That is
Yeah.
something when I in a visual fight scene when it looks like the characters are just hitting their swords against each other and not trying to hit the other person.
Hmm.
I don't like that. It should, even though it's choreographed that the blades are going to hit, they're not actually going to hit the other person. I want
Hmm.
to see it look like it was
Right.
tried and look like the parry is
Yeah.
real. And
I think
um,
also if you were to take the route of, have the sword fights, but also understand that for those characters, I remember once reading that they're digging up the battlefields in France or something, or they're looking at the skeletons of the veterans who came back, and almost all of them had these massive chops out of their thigh bones because that was right under the edge of the shield and stuff. And it just makes
yeah,
me realize when you're at the point that you're in a battle, you want it over as fast as possible. You want to get out of it as fast as possible. So the
right,
idea that you're trying to delay on both of you the actual moment of contact, and then you want it over as fast as possible, and you're like
right,
yelling and trying to overwhelm them with everything you can throw at them. um, it's a that's where the whole in the trenches and actual combat is different to how you how the training happens with wooden swords, and you got a
yeah,
5 minute duel. And so yeah, that's where I think doing the work, or trying to understand or get in the head of what is somebody actually feeling, thinking I'm not going to walk away from this.
right, yeah. I'm gonna look up how long actual fencing bouts are because I don't remember.
Oh, they're
They're very
fast though,
short.
almost
Okay,
annoyingly fast
so a
professionally.
regular bout, yeah, 3 minutes,
Wow. Okay.
for about to 5 points, and it usually doesn't get that long.
Wow.
Um, I mean, if I run out the clock, if when I remember fencing, if I
Hmm.
got to a 3 minute mark, and then I
Hmm.
think the referee calls a break at
Yeah.
3 minutes, I'm so exhausted. It is
There's so
so
much attention.
there's so
Yeah.
much. Well, it's physical energy too because you're doing all that footwork and your
Yeah.
knees are bent and you're low and you're going back and forth and you're going
Yeah.
fast and you're doing all the blade work and it's mental and physical work, and
Hmm.
a minute is exhausting. So
Yeah.
the longer you drag it out, the
Hmm.
more you're going to lose your energy and
Yeah.
lose or get injured
Have
or
you seen those, like they're like popular and they're taking off, where it's funny, you see these businessmen with their neat, ties and neat haircuts, and then they put on these full on leather thick plated suits of armor, and then they get inside these rings, and then they wail on each other with the swords and the shields and the halberds that they have. and you can pull it up on YouTube, and you can watch these guys actually go at it. And then there's like a moderator, hey, you I don't know, he's on the ground or he's out, and then they take their head off, and the nose is broken, the eyes black, and they're sort of banged up. And it's like, well, what's cool about that though is it's not choreographed. So if you want to capture some of that feeling for those who are writing, action scenes or so on, that's something that's valuable to go watch, because you don't have a character who's padded by plot armor and must survive the battle. This gives you a sense of how fast and then how brutal these things can actually be, and then how quick they are.
Yeah, very quick. Yeah, because in fencing, it's like the short bout to 5 points is 3 minutes long total. Yeah. And if you're doing the longer version, usually in the direct elimination part of a tournament, it's you're going to 15 points, and you can have 3 periods of 3 minutes. You get a minute break in between. So it's
So my favorite movie when it comes to sword fights, and this is from 10 years ago, I haven't seen it in 10 years, was Mask of Zorro with Antonio Banderas, the first one.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved the swords. I loved how they sounded. I loved how they moved. For me, I need to watch it again. But from what I remember,
need to watch that again too. I remember really liking that one.
Yeah. So what are some stories that do swords well?
A lot of fencers will point to The Princess Bride, and that's
and that was actually real fencing that they trained for in there, wasn't it? They actually
did. It looks very good to a fencer's eye.
Well, I remember actually reading one of the notes.
Yeah,
I remember reading the notes from behind the scenes that the actors actually taught themselves all of the routines. I don't know what the word is, of how those fights actually work, the way that they're referenced in the novel.
The footwork and the blade work.
Yeah, and the counting the numbered, like you said, the numbers for everything. So
that's a really fun one. That's classic that everybody seems to love, and I love too. And it does have the good dialogue, and you care about the characters, and these are 2 characters who aren't trying to kill each other. They see the swordplay as an art, and
that's a totally different. Totally different situation, scenario, where the sword fight is not actually about the sword fight. It's about them discovering each other.
Yeah. So that's a really good one. One of my favorite movie sword fights is in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie with Jack Sparrow and Will Turner in the blacksmith shop.
Okay, so that's close to the beginning, right?
Yeah, that's where they first meet each other, and Will has been training all these swords, and he's like, I'm doing this so I can kill a pirate when I meet him. And so they're also testing each other, but they are trying to kill each other. Then it goes on pretty long, and they use the environment, and the dialogue's good, and you care about the characters and the stakes there too. So that's one of my favorites.
He actually does. Jack Sparrow is like a Caribbean Jackie Chan thing, using the whole environment to just throw everything at everybody.
Yeah, he does. And they end up in the rafters and everything. And then actually toward the end, Will's like, you cheated, because he is using the environment.
Yeah.
So
so the cue there, in like in all of these, is yes, you might be writing about an actual sword fight that's going on, but is that what is actually happening in the scene? And if so, then maybe don't worry too much, I guess, about...
There should be a point beyond there's a sword fight.
The blow-by-blow thing,
Yeah, there's a story point. Why is this happening? Why does it matter to the plot? Why does it matter to the characters? What does it move forward in the story? And that's the focus of it. And the characters should be themselves, true themselves, and the characters are going to be what's entertaining us there in the written fiction, for sure. So you said you don't really care for
well, I don't know what to do with it, but you love it. So what is it
I really like it. It's different style than these other 2, are more close to the sport fencing that I learned, but they're a lot of them are very well choreographed, and they look awesome, and there's some really good...
They do. I mean, they do look awesome. And I love lightsabers and Star Wars, so No argument
Yeah.
there.
So some really good ones. There's some that are just look cool that they don't matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't feel the weight of the
Mm-hmm.
stakes and everything. The Star Wars, there's so much Star Wars out there, so I can't say that
True.
every Star Wars lightsaber fight is awesome, but there are
Mm-hmm.
some really good ones.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I point to Star Wars a lot. And then in terms of the tension between like swords are used to kill people, but we want to use swords to save people. My favorite story that deals with that tension
Mm-hmm.
is the manga and anime Rurouni Kenshin.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
Probably said that wrong, but anyway, that's really good. It started in the 90s. It's getting a
Okay.
remake this year. But that one's really good because it's about a samurai. So it's like historical fiction slash martial fantasy because it they do very elaborate things that aren't really possible in real life, and they have really long choreographed fights and everything.
Yeah.
But so it's a samurai who was basically an assassin and killed a lot. But now he's like, I'm never gonna kill again.
Mm-hmm.
But he's always like getting tempted to like kill somebody. So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
always everybody around him
Mm-hmm.
thinks that you should just kill people that are bad or that disagree with you or whatever it is. And
Mm-hmm.
he ends up defeating all the enemies without killing them because he's still using his sword, but it's a reverse blade sword, so he's always hitting with the flat of the sword.
What's a
Because with
reverse blade
katanas,
sword?
well, katanas only have one sharp edge.
Oh,
So
I
like a
see.
broadsword has two sharp edges,
Uh-huh.
but katanas have one sharp edge.
Right.
And he has a sword, and it's curved in a certain way, so you always like use that sharp edge.
Mm-hmm.
But his sword is flat on that side and sharp
Okay.
on the other side. So that's why I like that character because
Yeah.
that dramatizes that
It does
issue a lot.
something pointedly different with the tool to communicate something about um, the story and
Yes.
then why that's there at all, because it says something about the character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Intriguing. I'm trying to think of other movies that I've seen more recently, like the Witcher. Usually those scenes are quite fast and brutal, and he'll do interesting and new things I've never seen with swords.
Cool.
But he'll end up doing that because of the kind of hero character that he is. He can get in
Mhm.
closer. He has stronger arm length, and so they'll include these moves partly for the hero worship of it all, but also to keep demonstrating how qualitatively different he is to all the other men, and that really all these skills are better put, in the service of killing monsters. It's
Mhm.
kind of unfair to be going after people, but hey, they shouldn't have gone up against him or whatever. So in a way,
Right.
they'll get through it pretty quickly and brutally, and then you walk away from like what just happened with again, it's communication of the character and not what I would used to do when I was writing stories like yay, glinting of and banging and delightful bloodletting and all of this. It's like after a while that gets boring.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so like what
Well,
you're
that's
saying,
cool. I'm not familiar with The Witcher, so that's neat. Of course,
yeah.
there's a ton of other really good examples out there that I just aren't that familiar with.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's something you intend to be doing. So during the con, you're looking to host a hangout or an AMA all about swords and sword fighting, and you shared with me
Mhm.
a preview of a long list of swords that and in popular media and stuff that you want
Yeah,
to just
so
talk about and
I
have fun
start
with.
with my favorites, but I want to hear what everybody else's favorites are and why they
Yeah.
like them. So come
Hmm.
to the event at LegendHaven and tell me all your favorite sword scenes and
Yeah,
yeah.
just nerd out everybody and geek out about swords. So
Yes.
okay, so let's wrap then, Caitlin. So one,
Mhm.
everybody come and join Caitlin's follow-up AMA or the hangout. Look for it on the schedule at Legend Haven. Hey, if you have a sword, come and bring it and wave it on camera. I don't. Darn, I used to have a nice, cute little one. Do you have one you can hold up for the heck of it?
I just have my fencing foil
Oh,
with a
look at
pistol
that.
grip,
That is so
and
cool.
it's got the wire through it, and then Little
The
button on
blunted
the
tip.
end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is just my electric foil. Nothing special.
Nice.
I don't have any cool fantasy replicas.
My brothers, they would either make swords or buy swords and then gift swords, and that was a thing. We swords on every wall. Okay, where can people get in touch with you and again recap how you work, how you help authors, and the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, so I coach writers through planning, writing, revising a novel. I help them create goals to follow through to finish their book. I do this through accountability groups so that you can stay on track with your writing goals. I also offer one-on-one coaching for detailed, personalized feedback on your pages and personalized project management to get your book finished. So that's generally what I do. My website is www.katelincummins.com. And there will be a link under this video to sign up for my newsletter. And if you do that, then you will get a free one-page novel planning worksheet and an offer for a coaching deal on that.
Sweet. So there you have it, friends. Check the first link in the description to head on over and get a free one-page novel planning worksheet. And then subscribe to Katelin's email list so that you can stay in touch with her. I love the work that she does with our community. So a massive thank you to you, Katelin. We look forward to continuing to support everything that you do. And then for those who are coming to the con, again, look for the Swords Hangout on the schedule and hang out with Katelin. That's the second link in the description. Come and join us and register for free on October 14th. It's a Saturday. It's kind of a whole day event, just a whole lot of fun, all free for Catholic and Orthodox science fiction and fantasy readers and writers. So if you like all of this stuff, we hope that you come and join us, and we'll see you at the con. Till next time, everybody, God bless and keep writing.